Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Shane Mata with episode 2 of National Podcast Post Month for 2024. And the topic of today's episode is the experience of writing on paper. I did a bonehead mistake by recording an entire episode and I forgot to set up the screen share, so all it was a blank page, which is fine. I think I probably should have gone ahead and posted that. But were a couple of segments where I wanted to be able to show you things on the screen. So if you're listening to this in audio only, I'll try to describe things that I'm putting up here if needed. But that's one of the things you kind of have to work out in production is what you need to. Well, actually, you might just have to do another take, and there's no way around it. Sometimes it's so messed up that you have to be comfortable with starting over. And I've done this. Well, I haven't done this exact error more than once, but I've made mistakes where I just scrapped it and started over again. And I think my friend Jennifer and other podcasters have had the same experience where everything was going right until you figured out that it wasn't. And so what do? You just start over. I've had some shows where I've actually recorded the same episode 3 or 4 times because at some point I got myself all wrapped up and was not able to continue with the show. So I had to stop and just start over. All right, so today we're talking about the experience of writing on paper. And this came about because I sat down today to write a blog post. We talked about a topic yesterday about productivity and how I'm kind of organizing my papers and digitizing some stuff and shredding some other stuff. So kind of with that in mind, I wanted to write a blog post about that, but I didn't want to sit down at the computer because if I do sit down at the computer, I'll end up watching a YouTube video and before you know it, it's 4 hours later and I've accomplished nothing. So, I want to avoid that. I think, my name is Shane Mata. I'm a YouTube addict and, I need to stay away from YouTube as much as possible, and if I'm at the computer or even on my tablet, it doesn't end well. So I'm going to be using as much paper as I can. But I do want to kind of share with you some of the good things about writing on paper that you may not have thought about. So segment number 1 is about the appeal of writing on paper. And I don't know, I think I've watched a lot of, as I was saying, I've watched a lot of videos from other people who were talking about productivity, and they put a lot of value into having great pens and great paper. And they'll even talk about, if you have a fountain pen, how some papers will bleed through from one side to the other, and some papers are better at preventing the bleed through. And so that's not something that matters to me so much, particularly now because I'm using the Rocketbook notebooks, and the Rocketbook notebooks are the reusable notebooks that use synthetic paper, and they require that you use a specific type of pen, the Pilot friction pens, which are erasable, and all you need is a damp cloth to go in and wipe the ink off, and then you have yourself a clean sheet of paper again. And so I'm limited to using a certain type of ink or a certain type of pen and reusing the same paper over and over again for my notes. And so this reusability and a small number of pages. Somebody's driving by with a very loud muffler. So this limited number of pages does require me to frequently erase pages to be able to reuse them, and this works out fine for me. And we'll not go into too much about what we talked about yesterday, but so the point being that the experience isn't going to make that much of a difference for me because of what I'm doing. However, today I used a basic spiral notebook to write a blog post on yesterday's episode. So whatever I talked about in the episode yesterday titled Productivity Rabbit Hole, kicking off 2024 NaPodPoMo. In that episode, whatever I talked about, it was the basis for what I'm going to write the blog post about. And I had an old notebook, a spiral notebook that I had already transcribed and, put stuff in the computer. And so I tore out the pages that I've already used and shred them. And then I had some extra sheets left, so I used that to draft out a blog post. And so now that I've drafted it out, so I can share with you the experience in that, because there was no distractions, excuse me, there was no pop-ups, there was no incoming messages or anything like that. I was able to actually sit down and write and write and write and write. I even left my phone in the living room so there would be no phone calls. And so before I knew it, I was 4.5 pages into writing the blog post. And so that's just the first draft. I still need to go back tomorrow. I give myself some time between the draft and editing, so that way I can look at it with fresh eyes. But anyways, it would have taken me a long time to sit down at the keyboard to write this out, and I can't explain why. Yes, technically you write faster on keyboard, but I think I could probably use typing it up. Actually, do I have here? Let me put this here. I'm going to put in a note to the free write. Yeah. So there's a keyboard that I use called the free write, which is, it looks like a typewriter, but it's digital, and you can use it for drafting. There's no editing on it on the device. You basically, if you want to edit something, you have to go back to the computer, download your writing, and then print it out or whatever, and then edit there. But this is just to kind of promote and get the writing out of your head and onto paper, with air quotes. But I think I could use that for fiction, because that is just, it's just letting ideas flow out. With structured writing like a blog post or essays or whatever like that, I don't find that works as well for me, because there's some thinking that needs to go on paper as well, that just not straight out. But still, I find that structured writing on paper for me is a lot faster than typing it up, and not faster writing, because writing is still slower than typing, but you get the point. I hope you get the point. So that's how I got into this topic today, was because I had to sit down and write, and I found that the experience was very pleasant in being able to knock out some work pretty quick without distractions. So I could talk to you about the experience of pen and paper, but again, I don't do that. I am limited, so my experience is going to be different than yours. So I don't have any personal preferences on specific types of paper or writing instruments. So if you do use, like, for example, the Moleskine used to have a really good paper, but lately they've used a cheaper sort of paper, which does bleed through. So if you needed to use like a fountain pen, you wouldn't be able to without it, seeping through the page to the other side. For me personally, I'm getting away from Moleskines, not because I don't like them, but it's more of, it costs too much for something I'm going to shred or throw away. So I would rather just use the reusable paper or cheap 99-cent spiral notebooks that it's not going to pain me to put those pages through the shredder. So, because I've come to recognize that information is disposable. Not everything needs to stick around forever, and actually, most of the paper that I'm going to be producing from now on is going to be produced with the intent of destroying it at some point. So there's no point investing myself so much in pen and paper. I reject that approach to writing on paper. Having said that, there are benefits of writing on paper. There are a lot of people that have done YouTube videos that cite or mention that there are studies that show that there are better cognitive results from writing on paper, that you're able to retain more information and that you're able to, I don't know, think better on paper, I suppose. I can't. Let's just say it. I'll be skeptical on that until I personally see the research. I like the research. I like what they say about it, and I want to believe it's true. And from my experience, tends to agree with it. However, I don't know where to find that information to verify that it's true, that the studies do indicate that thinking and writing on paper is better for, improved memory and improved retention and focus and things like that. Well, focus for sure, because you don't have any pop-ups, but any of the other cognitive benefits. Let's see. Does it help with enhancing creativity and introspection? Introspection for sure. So I can definitely have tons of notebooks, journals that I've filled out over the years, and all of that's years and years of introspection. So yes, but is it writing on paper that makes you introspective, or is it the lack of pop-ups on the phone, or pop-ups, reminders and things like that distract you? So I'm more inclined to think that it's the lack of interruptions that makes you more creative and introspective than it is the actual act of writing on paper. So if we could make a computer only do one thing at a time, perhaps it may be possible to be more creative on the computer. But at this point, I haven't figured out a way, because anything that I implement on the computer, I can deactivate and I'm back to where I started. Whereas paper, you can't really upgrade paper that much to make it work for you to do other things other than be paper. All right, challenges and limitations. Downsides of paper, yeah. The downsides really is it really, the only limitation is that it's not digital, and therefore when it comes to archiving, it takes up the physical space, and if you need to find it later, it's not indexable. So you can't say, brain, where is my document about sneakers from 2023, and then your brain just goes and tells you, it's in the binder under the cabinet over there in the kitchen or whatever. It's not going to tell you that. And whereas on a computer, you can do a search and then you can kind of stumble upon a much easier where your document is located. And if you've done a good job of filing, then you have a filing system where you can keep writing and notes and things like that. And I suppose you could do that. But I don't know. It's the limitation is just the physical space. And for me, I'm trying to mentally declutter, but that also requires me to physically declutter the house. And so I'm making it a point to just eliminate paper as much as possible from my life, so that I can focus on the little paper that I do have and knock those things out before shredding the notes and or digitizing the information that is useful to me. All right. So really, that's the only inconvenience that I found with paper, other than, maybe you're outside and it gets wet. But I mean, try getting that, electronic device wet and see what happens. It's not that much better, much worse than electronics. Challenges facing with maintaining paper notes. I think I talked more about this in yesterday's episode, and the challenge isn't so much the challenge of keeping the notes. The challenge is actually keeping what's useful, and you have to actively make an effort to decide if you're going to keep the paper or discard the paper, and have a plan for that paper when you make it, because you can accumulate years and years of papers that aren't helping you, and you're afraid to throw it out because there might be something useful in it. But if you can take out the useful stuff, digitize it, and then shred or dispose of the junk, I think that's the experience that you want with regards to paper, and I think that'll clear up a lot of your paper challenges, because if you don't have the sheet of paper, you don't have to file it. And if you take out the useful information and aggregate it to other useful information that's related to it, you'll find all of that useful information in one place. It's all going to be together always. So I think by approaching things the way I am, I've eliminated some of the challenges of having paper notes. And I guess the plan is like Mr. Miyagi said, as far as like winning a fight is no fight. Just don't make the notes in the first place, or at least eliminate them entirely. All right, balancing paper and digital. How I'm integrating writing and digital tools with your workflow. So, I mean, these are great questions or great prompts for this, but it keeps coming back to the same thing, doesn't it? I mean, the integration with digital tools in my workflow is to sit down and actually create on paper, revise, and eventually at some point scan it or transcribe it into digital and post it. I'm inclined more to actually have notes on how to do things, step-by-step instructions, because I find that if I have marching orders, if I have steps in front of me on paper, I tend to follow that and get distracted less. So I think before I sit down at the computer, I might just end up having to write down things like what I want to accomplish, so that way if I do click on a YouTube channel or video, I can get back on track by following the plan, or at least having that plan there sitting at, staring at me to remind me to do the right thing. Offers tips and listen. Look, I don't have any tips. I'm figuring these things out as I'm going. You might want to experiment with some of these things as well, and try to incorporate some of those into the way you work. But my recommendation, based on my personal experience, is I need to return to paper, do everything in paper, calendar paper or paper calendar, note taking on paper, thinking on paper, all that, and then only afterwards bringing it to digital when I need it for long-term storage. I didn't put that in here, but AI obviously doesn't work on paper. There's no smart paper that you can buy that's going to give you ideas. And so I think if I'm going to sit down at an AI prompt, I would likely maybe sit down and think up prompts on paper first and kind of have a plan of what I'm trying to extract. Go do my interactions with the AI, take those notes, print them out, and then do the work on manually, so that way I have my own input, my own thoughts and ideas that are going into or working in collaboration with the AI. And then when I have a final or almost final product, bring that back into the computer. So I think that's kind of, for me, going to be the workaround for using AI on paper is you print out your results, and that's really the only way you can do it. All right. I think that's it. We've covered, it's all the same topic about the experience of writing on paper, but I think I've covered some of the main points here. And I do want to encourage you to give it a try. Try, if you're having trouble with paying attention, try just focusing that attention on doing things on paper, and then using your computer only for backups or planned out activities. Have a checklist that you're going to knock out on the computer, and then just do those things and just don't do anything else. Just step away and do your work on the paper. And my bet is that I will be more productive in terms of writing things and creating things than I would be if I were to do all of this on the computer. I've tried for many years. I actually was very productive and useful with paper long before. I bought into the whole idea of personal knowledge management with Evernote, with Obsidian, with all these other tools online, Smartsheet, all this. And those are great for collaboration, but the actual work I'm finding is not in those. You can't do the work in those tools. You have to do that work outside and then use those tools to communicate to others or to be able to transform your work into something useful. And that's what I'm discovering at this late stage in life, is that I should have just stuck to the paper from the beginning, because that is 100% effective, and at least in my mind, from my type of brain, it's working 100% of the time. All right, so I do thank you for listening today's episode, and I invite you to come back tomorrow for episode 3, National Podcast Post Month. We will be discussing other topics at some point on cryptocurrency, personal finance. We will talk about, I want to talk about politics before election day comes around. I do want to share my points of view on some things, maybe even some philosophical stuff. Who knows? After the 30 days of National Podcast Post Month, I do hope to have more frequent episodes. I do want to, I think I mentioned in another episode, is to share information so that way my family has a better idea of who I am when I'm no longer around. And so I want to record these things so that way they will know my thoughts on certain topics, and they can either share those thoughts or amongst themselves, or listen in. Who knows? So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.